My question is, what will this mean for the US users of TikTok?
Yeah, it looks like they're basically going to be quarantined in their own little bubble.
I'm pretty sure that if it came down to it, the Chinese government would rather TikTok shuts down its US department than to actually sell it to a US entity
Really?
because of the current political environment.
So that would mean like Americans would have no access to TikTok at all.
It could be a possibility. And I'm sure TikTok wouldn't want that to happen. Like commercially, it makes no sense. Of course, you want to sell it, right? But I really don't think the Chinese government at this point would allow something like that to happen in the current political environment.
Welcome back to episode 2 of our tech headlines for Briefly Creo. The last episode was one of my personal favorites, so I've brought back David and Sandy from Creo Legal to share all the latest developments in tech, chatting about all the new innovations shaping the future and the legal landscape surrounding it, and what it means for businesses and individuals alike. So without further ado, let's get started. First article, or I should say tweet, the simulation, the Netflix of AI. This is about Showrunner, a new AI-powered streaming platform launched by, is it Ed Satchi, the founder and CEO of the simulation. So this tool lets users create and customize their own TV episodes using AI. So it's aiming to be the Netflix of AI, which is pretty wild. It allows users to generate dialogue, characters, voice acting, and more based on prompts, and over 50,000 registrations already. So it's attracting huge interest from Hollywood filmmakers and sparking industry debates. Listeners, if you haven't already, you should go do a quick Google search and have a sneak peek of some of the teasers and episodes already out there. Yeah, David, what are your thoughts on the future of entertainment?
Well, this thing's super cool. The crazy thing is that we've only really just had a massive shift probably in the last 10 years where, Netflix and the other streaming services, from Prime and whoever have really taken over entertainment, and the traditional film industry is now, it seems like it's sort of in a decline. All the A-list actors and directors and whoever all now produce and, star in films on Netflix and even TV shows. If you go back 20 years, you wouldn't catch any A-list actor in any TV show ever, right?
Yeah.
So it's been such a massive shift already. And then now we're seeing essentially like a choose your own adventure type of entertainment. Like, are we going to have basically fully personalized entertainment where every single person only watches content like meant for them in a way? Showrunner is putting the viewer in the producer seat where you can just create something, and of course other people can watch it, but you can create what you want to watch. It's really going to turn things on its head if it actually is good. So that's the second thing. I'm sure it can already create sort of a short episode of something, but is that something that you yourself will want to watch, or would other people actually want to watch it? A 5-minute clip is very different from a 1-hour episode of, gripping drama. There's obviously a huge difference technically and creatively between those two things. But this is a really cool development. I'm really keen to see what it really looks like. They've already got a show on their website of something that they've already created, basically through prompts. It's like a cartoon called Exit Valley, and yeah, it looks really cool. Like, you can go check it out. The dialogue is AI generated as well, so it's kind of a little bit. I mean, it's not at the quality that you would expect of a professional voice actor in a show that you're watching on Netflix or wherever. But the fact that this was created through a text prompt and making, some changes to other settings is really cool. The guys who created this, actually, they have a post on their Twitter account from July last year where they had an example they used. They trained the system on South Park, and they said, we're not releasing this because it's not our IP. Fair enough. And they had it's basically like a demo where you would choose the characters, you would choose the backdrop, and then you would type the prompt, basically a little synopsis of what's going to happen in the story. And then it created all the animation, all the dialogue to fit that prompt. So if it really is something like that, then it's going to be really cool, at least just to play around with. We've been talking about AI video if the video gets really good, that it becomes photoreal, and then you combine it with this ability to create your own show, it's going to be quite amazing.
Well, I think this is basically Hollywood's worst nightmare come true. But look, all the talk about the whole strikes that happen, and the everybody securing rights in terms of AI, or when they struck that deal with the streamers and the platforms, etc. I guess you can tell right now that was all justified, right? Because these actors, they definitely are being threatened. But I mean, look, I have some reservations about this because it's very it sounds very exciting, and I think once it comes out, it'll definitely be very interesting to play with it to see what you can create. But I'd be very doubtful that you can create something of actual good quality that you would watch beyond the fact that I made this happen, I generated this, so it's fun to watch, right? I doubt you can produce actual quality content right away with the current tech available. 5 to 10 years, who knows? But right now, I think being realistic on what this is, it's a very good early demo of what's possible, I think. And we'll see where it gets to, because I think it's more a case of if this product goes out there, it garners attention, it starts getting users, it starts getting the VCs also paying attention and whatnot. They probably then get all the funding they need to develop into something that could potentially produce something that is, a commercial production quality, maybe in 3 years, 5 years, whatever amount of time. I'm not really expecting that this product's going to come out and we're going to start creating our own shows that we want to watch, because I just don't think the tech's quite there yet. Based on what I've seen, especially dialogue and stuff that's generated by AI, it's still clearly a little bit off.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, not to minimize the work of graphic artists or even video artists, but there is a difference between generating an image or even a video of some animation or even something that's photoreal, and creating a gripping story with good character development that really makes you want to watch. Who knows, maybe we'll get to the point where large language models are good enough to create something that is as good as what our best script writers can achieve now. But it seems like I'd be very surprised if we're anywhere close to that at the moment, even with this new Showrunner site that's coming online soon.
So I'll have to stay tuned to see where that heads. But yeah, it would be an interesting one, watching content that you only create yourself or just with your friends. I think that's such a point of conversation usually is, what television series you're watching and talking about it. But if no one's really watching the same stuff, it's going to change the conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is something that people talk about with each other, right? Did you see the latest episode of whatever show? And, it's and it drives popular culture as well. So if there's no common element, then what will pop culture actually become? And this is not just in video and TV and movies, but also music and literature and what have you. If no one is reading or watching or listening to the same things, then what will we actually share in terms of pop culture and just even the culture generally? What does everyone basically diverge and everyone just becomes their own thing? I mean, does that mean we lose our identities? There's so many other questions that come up with this stuff.
So true, isn't it? We the ladies of Creo actually got in an argument with Inoki the other day because he hadn't watched Yellowstone. So if you haven't watched Yellowstone yet, you better get on it.
I haven't.
I have not either.
Goodness, I knew it.
But look, see, this is the other thing. I actually read a critique of Netflix model just a couple of weeks ago, I think. It was interesting because it was something along the same lines as what we just discussed. The critique was based on the fact that how Netflix just likes to release everything all at once. The article suggested that this was actually sometimes affecting the success of a show, because sometimes the success of a show is based on episode released in 1 week, and then when that one episode's released, you get everybody watching, trying to get in and watch it, and then there's no discussion happening on social media, whatever, discussing about what happened in the episode, what's going to happen next time, what might happen later, etc. But when you do the whole season release model, the binge watch model, it just all gets dropped and people watching at their own pace. Nobody's necessarily watching it all in one go, and you don't have that social media discourse where everybody's talking about that kind of thing. And the argument was that for some shows, they would actually really benefit from this. And the fact that they didn't get that actually makes them, it could be the difference between them actually succeeding or becoming a mediocre show that people don't watch much. So yeah, I read a critique along those lines, but then this, potentially would be that dialed up tenfold.
True.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back when, you everything was just on TV, right? You just you watched one episode.
Wait a week.
And it would end on a cliffhanger, and you're like,
everybody's talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the next 7 days, like, you would talk about it, like, what do you think's going to happen? And that's all. It's already changed so much. But I do think some shows do intentionally release like 2 or 3 episodes, and then they'll wait a bit, and then 2 or 3 more episodes. I do agree. Like, you do lose something when everyone can just watch it in 24 hours, and like, they might talk about it for a little while, but then a week later they're on to something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We were just talking about that the other day. Even like, our kids have never experienced only having cartoons, at one time in the afternoon, and you don't know which cartoon it's even going to be and whether you're going to enjoy it. But that's the only opportunity you had to actually watch something for you. But yeah, everything's so instantaneous now. Anyway, moving on, Article 2, we have Sam Altman admits that OpenAI doesn't actually understand how its AI works, which, well, at least I'm not the only one here. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, I feel his name's going to come up a bit in this podcast. He admitted recently that OpenAI is struggling to understand how its own AI technology works. So despite raising tens of billions of dollars, the company has not yet figured out how to fully understand the decision and outputs generated by their AI models. This lack of understanding has sparked debates about the safety and robustness of releasing new, more powerful AI models without having complete insight into how they actually work. Sandy, what are your thoughts on, I guess, the implications of AI developers not fully understanding their own technologies?
I mean, that might sound a bit strange, but it's actually in the AI field, it's quite common. I've been working on this project with a data scientist who specializes in deep learning AI. So I've learned a lot about this kind of thing over the past year or so. That's how this, the whole point of an AI. I mean, we're talking about true AI in the sense that it's an algorithm. It's more than just an algorithm, but it's something designed to like sort of think for itself in a way. Like, it's not a case of you just giving it like a set of rules that it must follow. And then, if you see this processing in this way, if you see that processing in that way, in that sense, it's like designed to do a specific thing that the person told it to do, right? And you know exactly how it works, exactly how it comes to its conclusions. But a proper deep learning AI, or like LLMs and these models that are what's considered proper AIs, the whole point is that intelligence is artificial in the sense that you give it the ability to do these things, and then you set it free, try and give it all this data, set it free, let it then learn based on these learning algorithms that you gave it, and then let it go and then make its own decisions. So when it goes ahead and makes its decisions, you know that it's done so by learning based on all this data set, but you don't necessarily know exactly why it made certain decisions that it did. Just like another person, like you see other person do something, you don't necessarily know their motivations, the reasoning behind it. It becomes similar in that sense. So there are ways you can sort of like track down for every decision. You can probably trace through the code and really go back and dig through the logs and figure out exactly how this happened. You probably still get a broad sort of feeling, not exactly necessarily. It's still like a bit of guesswork, a bit of digging through code, but that's like, maybe hours and hours of work to figure out why it made one decision. And these AIs are making these decisions all the time, like to do certain actions, like it's happening all the time. So it wouldn't be practically possible to actually understand why they're doing things that they're doing. And that's the reality of these AI. That's why it makes things, I guess, a bit scary for people. When we get to a artificial general intelligence, the level where the AI is, actually at the human intelligence level or higher, that literally will be how it is. It's if you set it off to do something, you won't actually know why it's making its decisions. If you let it go ahead and just run rogue, it will go run rogue, and you won't have any idea why it's doing the things that it's doing. So that can be a bit scary, but that's kind of it kind of also is how the AI is supposed to work, though. That's the AI doing what it's supposed to do.
It makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable to think that even the scientists, when they take the output and they go back step by step, it just drops off. They might be able to follow it a little bit, and then it just completely disappears into this sort of void. They call it the black box. And then Like you can't trace it back to the original content that it was trained on. It just goes to show that we have the ability to do things and make these technologies that are so far advanced that even we can't understand it, which is kind of crazy when you think about that's even possible. I mean, if you look at brain science, we don't fully understand the brain, but we still know how to do lots of things and cure diseases and ailments, because we know if you do these certain things, you get the good result. Like this brings up the issue of AI safety, which there's been a lot of discussion about. Elon Musk goes on about this at no end. It's basically the reason why he departed OpenAI, because he disagreed with the direction that they were going in. It's sort of become a joke now that, it's called OpenAI, but really nothing about what they do is open. Elon Musk, taunted them. He said, well, I'll drop my lawsuit against OpenAI if they change their name to Closed AI. He has a point there. If we have this technology that is rapidly improving, it's essentially running away from us in the sense of how good it's becoming. How are we going to possibly control what that technology does, what impacts it has? But when you look at like the internet, I mean, we had a little bit more control over the internet. A lot of people argue, well, the internet was ultimately good overall for everyone. There's people today that will still say otherwise, but it almost comes down to, are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? I like to think of myself as sort of like an optimistic realist. And I know that in reality, bad things can happen even if people don't intend them to happen. So it does concern me a little bit that we are, even at this early stage of the technology, not understanding what it's doing, because I don't think we're going out the pace at which we can understand it it's never going to be faster than the pace at which it gets better and less understandable. So there are countries around the world that are bringing in AI safety type laws. I think that's a really important thing. But how do you regulate something you don't understand and no one understands? There's probably no better example of a moving feast than AI and trying to regulate it from a safety perspective.
And you got a problem with also like if for example OpenAI was really open and they got stuff out there that's pretty much AGI level, you got a problem with doesn't matter what regulations you have. If that code is out there for someone to access, anybody that feels like they don't, because people commit crimes. Like the people that don't want to follow the regulations can still just take this stuff, use AGI, that's an AI that's got a human level of intelligence or above, and use it for their own nefarious purposes, right? And they could use it to commit certain crimes, maybe do hacking. Who knows what else they can do with it? So all that regulation is good, but once the tech is out there, you can't really control what some people are going to do with it, and that's probably the scary part, I think.
Yeah, I've heard people liken AI technology to like nuclear fusion technology, or the technology used for nuclear weapons. I think that's going a bit far, but on the one hand, you do have something that's extremely powerful. In the wrong hands, it could be harmful to people. But like to be fair to those people who liken it to nuclear technology, if you have these open source models, then it costs you nothing to get it and start using it. Whereas if you do have information out there about how to make, a nuclear weapon, the ability of the average person to actually go out and get the materials and get the facilities and have all the money to actually do it, is the barrier is very, very high, right? So with AI, I do understand that once it's out there, any kid in his basement could start using it and for any purpose. And maybe it's the kids we need to be worried about because they don't have the maturity to actually know what they're doing. But, there's plenty of adults too that can do the wrong thing.
How can they, I guess, what measures could they put in place though for it?
You can build safety mechanisms into the AI itself. So people always talk about, for example, like having hard rules which the AI can't overcome. This is all sounding a lot like that. What's that movie? It's called iRobot by Will Smith is in it. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It sounds a lot like that. They can build hard rules in it that all the AI is supposed to be able to never circumvent. And look, to a great extent that'll work, I think. But once it gets to AGI, then everything's a bit murky because, like with systems that humans design, you always know there are flaws that come out. There's ways to hack things, get around things. So we might design a system where it looks like this rule is hard set and can't be circumvented. But when you get down to the details at the AI level, maybe there is a way to work around. If this AI is smarter than humans, maybe they can come up with a way that humans wouldn't be able to think of. Or if, for example, one of the simple rules I think actually they dealt with a bit in that iRobot movie. So if you have rules like you can never kill a human, for example. But what happens if if the AI is driving? Just throwing examples out there. If the AI is driving and it sees no way to avoid an accident, but on this way it's going to kill 2 people in a passenger car, and that way it might kill like 4 people in a different passenger car. Does it then have to decide how to take this action, even though I believe it's going to kill 2 people? Does that then violate the rule that I can't kill any humans? In this case, then do I just freeze and do nothing and then kill the passenger? Or maybe there's only one person who's a passenger in this car, and mathematically it's better to kill the passenger than the others than kill anyone in the other 2 cars. So what do I do? Right. So when you say hard rule is you can't kill any humans, that sounds good, but applied to real life scenarios, well, should there be exceptions? If there should be exceptions, can there be ways that AIs then work out a way to take advantage of that? You won't really know. It's a hard thing to actually implement, hard thing to know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, that movie is inspired by Isaac Asimov's Law of Robotics. And I found an article where someone was saying, how do we apply that to AI? And they came up with the 3 laws as they apply to AI, which are pretty interesting. They call them, the first one's the human first maxim. AI shall not produce content detrimental to humans or society, nor shall it permit its outputs to be exploited in ways that contravene this precept. Number 2 is the ethical imperative. AI should adhere to the ethical edicts outlined by its architects and curators. And the third one is reflective mandate. AI shall actively resist the propagation or magnification of biases, prejudices, or discrimination. Now, there's probably too many words in that, right? Because the more words you have, like you say, the more you can talk around them and create exceptions. I mean, the 3 of us are lawyers. This is kind of what we do for a living. It's impossible basically to distill the entirety of humanity and its safety and its longevity down to, 3 statements. But we've got to try, I suppose. The challenge is with software, you can just change it. If you've got mass-produced robots, at least you've got manufacturers who maybe need a license from the government and have oversight. But if you've got software that's open source, then anyone can access on the internet. How are you going to really control or impose these sort of hard-coded rules in software that anyone can just sort of select those rules and hit delete before they deploy the code? Maybe the only way is to have AI protecting us from other AI. I don't see how humans with our 10 fingers and limited minds can actually fight against something like AGI, which is what a lot of people are afraid about.
And then the other issue, saving from the iRobot movie, the whole plot was that the AI that was supposed to service humanity and protect them and whatnot had decided that the best way to serve humanity was to basically control everyone, etc. Because if the humans were left to their own devices, they're just going to kill themselves. So then, it believed it's better to take control of everybody, maybe even cull part of the population, whatever's required, right? And that's an extreme view, but again, it comes back down to that same question. Well, what is a rule? Protecting AI, and then you say, protecting humans. What does that really mean? And when we talk about ethics, well, what's ethical? Is it? It's hard to say. Once you have to define it into rules, it's hard to say how exactly it needs to be applied. So it sounds unethical that obviously everybody's lives controlled, and some people just have to be killed if the AI deems that it's best that these people die or something. But then on the flip side, to the AI, they might think, well, is it also ethical to let things keep going the way it is? Because by the AI's calculations, everyone's going to die in 500 years, and all these children are going to starve. So isn't it better to just kill a few now to save the many? Well, which one is a more ethical option? If you want to actually implement these rules, you have to set all these boundaries, and it becomes hard to then, I think, actually say what's good. And if you set hard boundaries along these lines, that could be just one person's view at a point in time. In 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, people might have different views, or even in the same time frame, another scientist has a different view to this guy as to how, what actions are ethical, what actions are not. How are you ever going to make sure the correct set of rules apply? That's going to be a pretty tricky question, I think.
Yeah, philosophers have been debating for millennia. How do you overlay, or how do you reconcile laws, with morality and ethics, and like how do they all play together? Maybe with AI, like you have to kind of hard code that in a sense. If you want the outcome that we think is beneficial for us, then you've got, like you say, like a short-term benefit may result in a long-term detriment. With the AI that played chess and Go and those games, they saw that the AI would make moves that kind of didn't seem to make sense, but it made total sense because the AI could see that many moves ahead and had all this data, and based on evidence knew that that was the highest probability move, or the move with the highest probability of success and a long-term win. So like we can't think enough steps ahead. It's hard enough really for most people to plan years ahead, but like at a sort of societal level, like if we get to a point where we do have AGI and it's infinitely powerful, it should have no issue planning 1,000 years ahead, which is basically impossible for humans to do. And, maybe the AI decides that if it does this certain thing today, kills one person, like in the Terminator movies, like it saves 100 million people in 500 years time. And we won't, us living for 100 years or less, we won't really understand that. And it's very hard for us to do so.
All concepts I thought I would never have to consider or think about in my lifetime, but yes. Article 3, TikTok preparing a US copy of the app's core algorithm. TikTok preparing a US copy of the app's core algorithm, it's independent of its Chinese parent company, ByteDance. This move aims to address concerns from American lawmakers about data security and influence, despite ByteDance's claim that selling TikTok's US assets is impossible. The company is working to separate millions of lines of code to create a standalone US version of the app. My question is, what will this mean for the US users of TikTok?
Yeah, it looks like they're basically going to be quarantined in their own little bubble, which, like, it may not actually be that bad. Perhaps the TikTok US business can continue as is, but it would need to be sold based on the recent law that was passed that requires ByteDance to sell its US business. They initially said they would prefer to close down, and now they're separating the code, which I thought might happen. I think there's a lot of political posturing and doing things to gain leverage to set up a proper sale. The TikTok US business is huge. It is, as far as I'm aware, sort of like the number one place to release a song, right? Like it is basically a record label in the sense that you do a deal with them for marketing, and then they push it out through all the influencers, and then that's how you get all your listens on Spotify and like iTunes and wherever. Like it all starts in TikTok, but it's the home of like retail products and everything. It is super important for a lot of people. There's a lot of people who are on TikTok all day, and if TikTok US closed down, like I don't know what they would do. Maybe they'd all go over to Instagram, which would make Meta very happy. I think if the law is upheld and it's not challenged, then like commercially it just makes sense to sell the business. The fact that they're splitting the code seems to be setting up for that, and I don't think necessarily it's a big deal for US users if TikTok US is sold. Maybe us sitting here in Australia, it might result in some changes for us if things happening on TikTok US are not reflected in what we're using here. Like it's going to be really interesting because like a lot of the content that we get in Australia tends to be like US centric as well. So I don't really know what that means for the rest of the Western world who are on TikTok, whether the content starts to shift more towards European or Asian content. I mean, who knows?
I have a slightly different view on whether TikTok will actually sell its US division. I think given how things are developed, I really don't think that it will sell purely because of political pressure. Because at the end of the day, TikTok is, it's the parent company is ByteDance, is Chinese. And this has now come down, like this is a very significant move that basically US is trying to force TikTok to sell its US arm. And the Chinese government side has reacted quite strongly to it. And there's always been a bit of this sort of nationalist sort of thing. It's very on trend for, I guess, the whole narrative that China's been pushing. to its young people, to its population in general, towards more of a nationalist sort of focus. And yeah, like so China is actually, from a political perspective, very, I guess, outraged, and already publicly expressed its outrage to even the thought that a US company can force a successful Chinese company to just sell an arm of its business like that. Now that this has happened, and at the end of the day, like the way business works in China, any company in China, especially these days with Xi Jinping in charge, any company in China must have basically a department that caters to governments. When it comes to issues like this, there's no way that they're able to do anything without government's approval. Like selling, when we got this huge issue involved, and then potentially selling the whole source code in US arm to a US entity, lose control of it, there's no way. Like the Chinese government is going to be all over this. Any deal that comes through, the government must be happy with. There's no other way for this to go. So that's a very different, I think, thing that you will see in the US. Any other company like Meta, for example, that's a US public company. If they wanted to sell an arm of their division to somebody else, as long as it passes regulatory approval, then it's up to the company itself, right? But that is far from the case in China. So I don't think, practically speaking, TikTok is going to be able to sell its US arm, even if it makes sense, even if profit-wise, monetary-wise, business-wise, even if all of that makes sense. But in terms of the code that they're preparing, my feeling is that source code, because I think they will try to take advantage a little bit of the US laws. Laws in the US and in the Western countries generally are usually a bit fairer, in the sense that they wouldn't normally force a private company to do this for no reason. Here, the issue is this national security concern, right? So I feel like what TikTok might be trying to do is they prepare this separate source code that, because I do feel like the original source code that ByteDance has will have something where they are able to hand over the stuff to the Chinese government if asked to. Because as far as I know, that is actually a requirement for a lot of these companies to be able to operate. So despite what they say, I think that the TikTok code can do this if the government requests it. But to make this work, to make this not a national security concern in the US, I feel like what they might try to do is say, well, they prepare this separate source code where if you can look at this source code, an independent party, government entity, whatever, can look at this source code, verify that there is no way in this app for code to be sent to ByteDance or anybody else without maybe the agreement of a third-party government-controlled entity, whatever it is, like a U.S. government approved entity or something, right? So now that an independent third party can verify that this version of the source code has no way to leak data to the Chinese company or the Chinese government, what they will try to do is say, well, this app is no longer a national security concern, therefore you should not go ahead and force us to sell. So I feel like that this is what they're trying to get to, but we'll see how. That's my assessment of it, but we'll see what actually happens from here, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a valid strategy. But the question is, like, the bill was signed into law in April. Like, if they're going to not sell and not comply with that law, they would need basically that law to be repealed.
Well, I mean, just like they will just shut down. Like, I know that I'm pretty sure that if it came down to it, the Chinese government would rather TikTok shuts down its US department than to actually sell it to a US entity. Really? Because of the current political environment.
So that would mean like Americans would have no access to TikTok at all.
It could be a possibility. And I'm sure TikTok wouldn't want that to happen. Like, commercially, it makes no sense. Of course, you want to sell it, right? But I really don't think the Chinese government at this point would allow something like that to happen in the current political environment. But, that's my assessment of it. We'll see what happens, I guess.
Yeah, stay tuned. The repercussions of that would be wild, wouldn't it? Article 4, $1 billion for Australian project to build first useful quantum computer, a major investment by the Australian and Queensland governments, who will jointly invest almost $1 billion in California-based PsiQuantum to build the world's first fault-tolerant, error-corrected quantum computer right here in Brisbane, Australia. Firstly, Sandy, maybe you want to explain what exactly that means? And obviously, with such bold investments, what challenges and opportunities do you foresee in establishing Australia as a leader in quantum technology?
Yeah, sure. Like, I'm not sure if anybody can really properly explain what quantum computing means at this point in time.
I was hoping you could.
Yeah. Look, it's a lot of theory and probabilities at the moment. Theoretically, if they actually manage to produce this at a commercial scale, you're able to do lots of things. Like, for example, because it's non-parallel processing, it works very differently from the way computing currently works. So a lot of the limitations that apply in terms of calculations, etc., none of them apply to quantum computing. So things like what things we're used to doing, like encryption algorithms that we are so used to relying on banking, for blockchain, for all these other things that theoretically can be easily broken by a commercial scale quantum computer, because it doesn't need to do this kind of linear logical processing. It has different ways of operating, right? The way these encryption algorithms work, they make it so hard to calculate the input based on the result, based on the encryption key that you see. They make it so hard for you to work backwards and calculate the input that with current computing power, you can arrive at it, but it'll take you, like 1,000 years before you get there, right? So that's effectively safe. It's not impossible, but it's going to take you so long that it effectively means that you can't crack it. But if quantum computing can turn that around, and instead of taking 1,000 years, it now takes 2 hours, and that could be a possibility if everything works out, then that's going to turn this whole, I guess, encryption industry on its head. And that's one of the, I think, main practical consequences of quantum computing that could immediately have a very big effect on us. But it can do lots of other things potentially in terms of just being able to approach calculations from a complete different perspective, completely different and new way. Potentially it can do everything. Basically, if you read what's possible, well, almost anything is possible with it. But there's still a very big question mark as to whether a true commercial scale one can even work. I mean, so far we've seen, I think Google was probably ahead of the game in terms of, I think it was Google that was ahead of the game and had some sort of quantum computer that was able to operate for a period of time and make certain calculations. But this is very, very early days, right? So we're talking about under controlled conditions. It can run for maybe an hour or something and do certain specific things within that time frame. It can show that it can do these things within that time frame. But to be useful, it needs to be 100 times the scale it currently is. It needs to last permanently, not just work for an hour or something like that. We're definitely nowhere close to, I think, a proper commercial build of doing practically useful things, I would think. But the technology sounds very exciting, and everybody's trying to get in, I guess, to the first person to crack quantum computing may start a whole revolution, and assuming they do crack it. So I think that's the enticing thing about it. I'm almost not sure whether Australia should be going ahead to spend $1 billion on trying to advance this tech, because as exciting as it is, I think the benefits are still very much uncertain, and I don't think it'll turn into any useful results for many, many years still. So, you never know, I suppose. This could be something that, maybe it turns out that these guys work out a breakthrough, and then it benefits Australia for decades to come. But I think that's a pretty remote chance. To throw $1 billion at it, it's a pretty big gamble, I would think, as exciting as it is.
Early days.
Yeah, on the one hand, I'm excited that something like this is happening in Australia. I believe some of the founders of PsiQuantum went to the University of Queensland here in Brisbane. But on the other hand, I'm a bit skeptical that, and I don't want to make this too political, but, this is the kind of thing where it's invest in the future, check, invest in technology, high technology, check, and it's the government's done, they've now secured Australia's future. But, with quantum computing, my understanding is that still at the moment, you basically need an entire room's worth of equipment to make it run, and it has to be cooled, with liquid nitrogen. So we're quite away from having a quantum computer in our pockets. But, it wasn't that long ago either where just normal computers were that size as well. And now we do have those computers in our pockets. It's pretty exciting. It's one of those things where it's kind of like AGI. It's you don't really know what's on the other side of it. You know that there's all these sort of theorized outcomes, but who really knows what impact it would have on society as a whole. It's cool to see that quantum computing is progressing and that it's happening in Australia.
There's still a whole cohort of scientists that I think don't believe quantum computing will ever amount to anything. So whether you even will be successful is still very much open to debate by the top experts in the world. So yeah, investing $1 billion at it, like I said, it's one of those high high risk, high rewards gambles, I guess. If it works out, huge benefits. But I think there's only a small chance that we'd actually throwing $1 billion at it and actually getting to a point where Australia builds the first useful quantum computer in the world. I think there's only a pretty small chance of that actually happening.
And $1 billion is that's not going to get us to commercial level quantum computing, right? So $1 billion is just a drop in the ocean of what probably would need to be invested to get to the point where the everyday person is using a quantum computer.
Well, stay tuned. It's happening here in Brisbane, so hopefully we'll see or hear lots about it. Article 5. Industries may be ready for humanoid robots, but are the robots ready for them? This is a TechCrunch article. It's discussing the current state of humanoid robots in the industry. Despite the hype, actual implementations are limited. So companies like Nira, Agility, Boston Dynamics, and Apptronic show varied progress. So while humanoid robots have great potential in manufacturing and logistics, challenges like safety, functionality, and realistic deployment timelines are still there. David, what are your thoughts on the readiness of humanoid robots for industrial application?
We've seen some cool developments recently. The one pictured there is from Boston Dynamics, and I've been sort of loosely following what Boston Dynamics has been doing over the last 10 years or so. You know, they started with the one that was like a dog. I forgot what it was called, but
remember that.
And now there's this humanoid one. Obviously, things are getting better. So it's just about where can this potentially go? And, you know, eventually we're going to have robots that move like we do, right? It's just about miniaturization and like efficient use of energy through batteries and all this stuff. I mean, technology always gets better. So we're going to get there. So, but what does that mean? And are we actually going to have sort of general purpose robots? Will every household just have sort of like a robot to do things?
Babysitter.
Like, yeah, like just can you look after my kid and like make me a sandwich and I'm just going to go for a run? And, you know, like, is that really going to happen? I'm not really sure. If it does come down to like, is it safe? Is it affordable? Those two things theoretically are solvable problems, right? Like safety can be solved or at least mitigated to a point where the risks are so low that people will accept it and lawmakers will accept it. Costs can also be reduced to a point theoretically that it's going to be affordable by a lot of people, maybe not everyone. Hopefully, if you do have sort of a household robot, it's not going to be sort of this sort of creepy thing that just hangs around and, you know, like looks at you through the window. Like, so like maybe we'll get to a point where everyone has one. I'm not going to be first in line to like the people at the Apple stores with the new iPhones. Like, I'm not going to be the first in line to get one of these robots, maybe for a smash test. But I'm really interested in robotics, and obviously added that to the software side with artificial intelligence. There are clearly massive things that could be done, and there are definitely smart people that are trying to do those things. It's just going to be, there's so many challenges involved.
I was just thinking, when you combine robotics, AI, and all that, like what jobs will be available for any of us in the future?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, Elon Musk had this view that in the future, jobs just won't be required.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's a very utopian type of view, but I mean, nobody can tell what happens, but I can certainly see it as an actual possibility at this point. Because if you get there with the tech, and all the jobs are done by robots, but people are still around, obviously. It's just that our whole economic model, how people work, how people earn money, that whole model will change, I think, if that happens. But as long as it changes and adapts, I can potentially see a world where all these manual labor jobs are just completely taken by robots. But people they may still earn money other ways, or perhaps maybe the robots will take care of all the basic necessities, meaning that humans don't actually have to worry about necessarily finding a job because robots are doing everything necessary to, put food on the table for you. For example, if everybody has right to that, then maybe it's just whole other things that we've got to worry about instead of, I have to go to work today and otherwise I'm not going to be able to feed the kids. Maybe that won't be a concern at all. You get into very theoretical territory at that point.
I have heard people talk about how like a lot of jobs will just be done by robots or artificial intelligence, and then people will just be free to be creative, and most people will just be sort of in creative industries. But then I think that sort of narrative or that view was before recent developments in AI, where artificial intelligence and large language models and what have you can also create that creative stuff, images, videos, music. So like what is left for us to do? I don't know.
I mean, in terms of this article, though, I feel like I think we will get there. And I think the way it's going to develop is going to be very similar to what Neuralink's doing, for example, with brain chips, right? Like if they start off with testing on people who can't move themselves, who are paraplegics, who, for them, there's very little reason not to try it. Like, they'll take the risk. And if something happens, they accept the fate because the upside is that they can be much more in control of their lives. And I think it'd be similar in the sense that the first humanoid robots would probably be tested on people who can't look after themselves but really don't, want to be in a nursing home situation, for example, or whatever, and they might prefer to test having a robot help them and then still being able to then otherwise mostly be independent, things like that. I feel like that's probably going to be something like that, where you start off with people who really need this kind of thing, and then from there you develop. Things might happen, it might not work perfectly the first time, but you're going with people that accept the risk. And afterwards, it might develop into something more general purpose. But I think we're pretty far from the industries being ready for these humanoid robots, to be honest. And that is why this article says, you could easily walk the entire automated floor without spotting a single humanoid, right? Even though now more people are trying it, I still see us being pretty far away from having a humanoid robot that can actually even mostly just do simple tasks by itself. Because inherently, it's just so much easier to create purpose-built robots than general-purpose ones. It's supposed to be able to do everything. Just the fact that it needs to walk on two legs, that was a problem. Just walk on two legs and balance itself, potentially run and jump. That was a problem that took years and years, if not decades, to solve. And the fact that it takes so long to solve, a lot of the time, what are you trying to get it to do? If you're trying to get it to travel from one location to another, you could use a drone, you could have other solutions. You don't need to make this humanoid robot to walk up that slow. You can do something else that's much easier, right? So until we get to a point where the tech makes all of this very easy to achieve and no longer a difficult thing to solve before you even get to why we want them to do this, I don't think we're going to be there. I see it being quite far out still, I think.
So I don't need to worry about the robots just yet.
I mean, you never know with the pace that tech's developing. 20 years could be a long time in tech. Maybe 20 years later we'll see a robot like this. It's just that right now I'm not seeing, even though there's so many companies making these humanoid robots, I'm not seeing them starting to enter homes for years and years still. That's my view of it anyway.
Next up, another TechCrunch article. Humane urges customers to stop using charging case, citing battery fire concerns. So this article discusses a recent issue with Humane. It's a startup known for its AI pin. The company has asked customers to stop using its egg-shaped charging case due to potential battery fire hazards. This comes after an investigation following a single complaint. Humane has disqualified the battery vendor and is currently searching for a new supplier. They're also offering 3 months, I think 2 free months, of its subscription services compensation. Sandy, is this a viable product category or?
Look, it's hard to say. I'm sure it'll find its users. What's, I think, being said is that a lot of these functions, because it's using AI to help you do things like, for example, assisting you with even remembering conversations or tasks that you had to do. It just works as this pin on you that's supposed to be, I guess, monitoring things, recording and stuff to then be able to assist you later on. Theoretically, you can do functions like that with your phone as well. But this one is just a purpose-built one that might be able to do a specific task better if it was just pure software and on your phone. So I can see a market for it. I mean, a lot of things, even if most of the general population will use it, doesn't mean you can't carve out a niche market for yourself. So I definitely see a market where people want to use this thing. I'm just not quite sure about how popular it's going to be, especially with how phone tech and AI tech is developing. Yeah, I'm not sure if people will want this thing that's, I guess, constantly with them. At least for now, mostly people have been using AI in the sense to, even when Microsoft releasing its new feature that's supposed to, basically know what you're doing on your computer, and then if later you ask the AI to look for a document or retrieve something, or maybe even a conversation on Facebook Messenger or whatever that you had, supposedly the AI is supposed to be able to go and find that because it's constantly recording. Even that is, I think, going to a space where people are thinking, well, do we really want to go that far? This AI is recording everything I do. And this is just in front of the computer. So I think for the AI ping from Humane here, it's supposed to sort of be with you and just all the time and recording and analyzing what you're doing all the time. I think the uptake, at least unless you get to a point where the general population is comfortable with that concept, I don't think it'll have a huge uptake. But again, this is new tech, right? I mean, they have all the VC funding, they developed this, and you sort of just curate it, iterate it, make it happen to achieve new functions, and sort of just pray that people are going to like it, and put more emphasis on that than this fear of being always recorded and monitored.
As a product category, it's possible it could survive in the long term. There's definitely an overlap though. I mean, we've already got smartwatches and we've got our phones. I mean, how many different devices do we need? AI tech can be put into your phone or your smartwatch already. There's obvious privacy concerns with just having this thing just constantly listening and watching
Yeah.
But, these are like first generation products. Humane's product was more or less trashed across the board by most tech reviewers, at least what I've seen. There are these other ones by other companies as well that were like equally bad, apparently. That doesn't mean they can't make it better. And I think, Sam Altman has some involvement with this one as well. I mean, he's just about everywhere in the space at the moment. I'm not going to be wearing one. I don't even have a smartwatch. So yeah, it's not really something that I would use, but I might be eating my words in 10 years because it might get to a point where it's just that useful that you're going to be using it, and maybe having it in your pocket is not good enough because it can't hear what you say and see what you do. This one, it's an area that we can watch, but it's definitely not a very good product at the moment.
Last article for the day. I told you Sam would be coming up again. This is our last headline, though. The article discusses OpenAI CEO Sam Altman's ambitious $7 trillion plan to enter the chip manufacturing industry, with TSMC's chief has called too aggressive. Altman's proposal includes building dozens of factories to alleviate the AI industry's chip shortage, positioning OpenAI as a potential competitor to major chip makers like TSMC and NVIDIA. What are your thoughts on the feasibility of Altman's rather ambitious chip plans, David?
Well, I'd have to believe the TSMC chief's comments when he says they're too aggressive and probably not that realistic. But, people have said that about what Elon Musk did with his Tesla factories. So to some extent, I give these people the benefit of the doubt. TSMC is the largest manufacturer in the world of the higher tech chips. They're based in Taiwan. So they really know what they're doing. This chief is, I believe, newly installed. Chips are absolutely required for AI to work at scale. You need the computing power to process all the information and give you the output. Sam Altman's obviously identified that as a huge bottleneck in the future. He's already doing a lot on the software side, but there's no point releasing software that no one can run if no one has enough computer chips. Through COVID, we already had a huge computer chip shortage, and we all saw what happened with that, with car prices and just availability of cars and other products as well. It is a problem, and whether his solution to solve it is viable or not remains to be seen. But it's definitely a problem that needs to be tackled. We should have, and I'm sure there are lots of people from the other major chip manufacturers that are actively looking into this at the moment.
I think it's very reasonable for the TSMC CEO to be cautious of this. In business, I mean, this kind of thing happens all the time. There'll be a big customer that wants to do things that might even require you to build a second or third factory, right? And they'll be cautious already at that point. Now, just put that in perspective. Sam Altman wants these guys to build dozens or more factories to build specifically to manufacture these chips, which, I mean, the market's looking good right now, but that's the huge capital commitment. Is the market going to look the same in 5 years, 10 years? It's very, very risky in that sense. I mean, these guys, I find a lot of these high profile tech guys, they're used to that sort of concept of, betting big. Now you have not seen the hundreds of corpses along the road of people that bet big and lost. But the ones at the top right now are the ones that bet big and won. So they'll continue betting big, and they may continue to be successful. But they also, if they fail, then they fail. And at the end of the day, it's not these guys necessarily personally that will suffer. It's these companies that they try to bet big with. So for TSMC, I think it's going to be, if they build this and something like the .com bubble happens, they're just going to be completely screwed. So it's definitely a huge undertaking. But if he finds somebody that wants to bet big with him, and he goes ahead and does it, and it succeeds, then that's also the success is going to be pretty wild as well. So I think that's what we're looking at basically. For me personally, I think there's still a reasonable chance, because we're talking about the AI tech as it currently works requires a lot of processing power. But there's no guarantee that new algorithms and other software developments won't happen in the future that makes them more efficient as well. So you're projecting the hardware need based on current algorithms. But what if the algorithms improve the efficiency by 10-fold, 100-fold, even 1,000-fold? Now, who knows, maybe quantum computing gets a breakthrough and everything's suddenly so much easier to process. I mean, I don't know. You can't really know in this sense. And I do still feel like potentially the chip market right now, with how crazy NVIDIA stock has been going as well, because everybody's jumping on board, seeing this huge demand for hardware chips. I do think these things, there's a good chance of these things being required in the future with the way AI is developing. But there's also not a very small chance that something like the dot-com bubble is going to happen to some part of the AI industry the way things are going right now. So I would be cautious of that, yeah.
Look, that wraps up today's episode of Briefly Creo Tech Headlines. So thanks, David and Sandy, again for sharing with us today. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please do like, follow, share, and comment. It all helps us out. We'd love to hear your feedback as well. So please feel free to shoot us a message or leave us a comment. And any review would be most appreciated. But yes, please reach out if you have any questions. We'll be happy to answer them on our next episode. Otherwise, we'll talk to you soon.